everybody. I'm Ed Kapuscinski. Many of you before I do this, I don't know, pretty frequently whenever we don't have another presenter. But today I'm excited because I've got a presentation that I'm working on that I'm planning on trotting out for Symposium, and you guys get to be my beta testers for the thing. I've been through it once before, so this is time number 2, and hopefully it goes a little bit better than the first time. I've added a few more images, like cutting onions in my kitchen, and so bear with me if I get anything wrong in here. And feel free to point out errors so that I can claim the fixes as my own. All right, so I'm going to talk about interest-based behavioral personalization and predefined personalization rules. These are the building blocks of personalization in Sitecore, or part of my building blocks of personalization in Sitecore series. I also do a presentation called Getting Started with Personalization that really just walks through, like, these are the couple of interfaces that you click through to actually do a thing. Don't get into it much more than that, but it's a half an hour, 45-minute thing, and lots of people are really interested in that because even though they've purchased the platform, they purchased it to do that stuff. They've never actually done that stuff, and so as I'm doing it, there are lots of light bulbs that go on through the room. It's really fun. So this is kind of designed as the, what's the next step and how do we do the really cool stuff that everyone talked about in the demos. So I always like to start off with defining terms. So this is, what is behavioral-based personalization? In this case, it's the ability to show visitors different content based on your assumption of what they're interested in, based on what they've done on your website already. This is all done using Sitecore's rules engine. Using that, we're able to target users based on their behavior. As we all know, Sitecore uses rules to target users for the application of personalization. There are many of these rules that come with the platform, and the approaches that I'm talking about here are all using stuff that are out of the box and that you can use to target users based on stuff they've done on your site. So first we're going to talk about goals. So goals are the way that you're able to target visitors who visited one of many potential pages or done one of many potential actions. Right? You can think form thank you pages or other types of user has converted pages, like the here's your order total cart or page or something like that. Right? If you want to personalize based off of has this person filled out a form, and if you apply the goal to those thank you pages, it doesn't matter which form they filled out, as long as they go to that thank you page, that goal will be applied. So these types of behaviors are tracked using goals and then assigning them to pages. Once a visitor has visited a page that has had a goal assigned to it, there will be tracked as knowing that that visitor has achieved that goal. And then you can personalize your content using a rule to target visitors who've achieved that goal to do the actual personalization. So goals, like most of this stuff, is created inside the marketing control panel. They all live in Sitecore's content tree, just like everything, because Sitecore is made out of Sitecore. They're all found underneath the goals section, unmysteriously named, in the marketing control panel. If you need to get to the marketing control panel, it's found in the Sitecore start menu or the launch pad. You can see the icons for it up there on the right. And once you're in the marketing control panel, you'll see that's what it looks like in the content tree. Adding a new goal is simply done by inserting a new one underneath the node, filling out its fields, and moving it through workflow. Now, there's a nice thing in goals in that you're able to organize them inside the content tree, right? So you can say these are the ones for commerce, these are the ones based on orders, these are the ones for like signing up for a user, or these are the ones for this site, these are the ones for that site in a multi-tenant setup. However, Sitecore does this unhelpful thing where it takes all of your folder structure and then smashes it all together when you're actually choosing a goal to assign to a page. So, as handy as that may seem, beware that this happens. So if you have goals that you're not planning on using, either delete them or do something with permissions to hide them or something so that this way this list over on the right, or that you see over on the right, isn't 10 pages long worth of scrolling and people aren't sure which one they should choose when they're applying it to content. So how do you actually assign those goals to pages? In the Analyze tab on a piece of content inside Content Editor, there is a button for goals. You click that, it pops up that screen we just saw, you choose your goal, hit OK, you're ready to rock and roll. So then how do you actually personalize using those goals? Use the rules, right? There are 3 goal conditions that you can use. First one is where the specific goal was triggered during the current visit. Pretty straightforward. You, when you're setting that up, you choose the goal, you choose the rule, you choose the goal, ready to go. Then there are these other 2 that seem slightly more complex because they are, but they also do very handy things, right? This is where the specific goal was triggered during a past or current interaction, and when the number of elapsed days compares to the number, and when the past number of interactions compares the number, and the other one, you can read that too. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but essentially what these do is they let you set up goals across visits to the site. Now, of course, this requires that you've got XDB enabled and that you're capturing data and that you're able to sync up a user from visit to visit, but as long as you can do that, you can use these to personalize across that, right? And even though there are all these comparisons that you can say, you can just kind of negate those comparisons by saying where the number of elapsed days is greater than 0, right? So, still really useful. You just kind of have to get over the fact that there's a paragraph of a rule there. The next up, engagement value. Engagement value is a way to measure how valuable a visitor is on your site, right? As a visitor browses around the site, they can accumulate a running tally of engagement points based on the various things that they've done, like registering a goal, visiting a specific page, etc. And then once you've done that, or then once they've done that, you can make personalization decisions based on a visitor's engagement value. So, how's engagement value calculated? You can assign engagement points to various user actions through the CMS. The easiest way to do this is to assign points to a goal, so that when a visitor achieves that goal, you now increment it by that number of points. So, if you want to follow the paradigm of form thank you pages, if a visitor using form thank you pages, if a visitor has filled out the contact us form, maybe they get 10 points. If they fill out the request a demo form, maybe they get 20, right? Or if you want to do something a little bit more diffuse, I like doing things where if someone has viewed a blog post, they get 5 points. If they view a white paper, they get 10. If they view a product demo, they get 20 or something like that, right? So engagement value could be a really handy tool to quickly roll that stuff up and then make decisions based on it. So how do you personalize against that? Like everything else, there are rules. Under visit, in the selection of rules, you could say where the number of engagement point value compares to a number, and under visitor, you can also say where the number of the contact's current engagement value points compares to number. That second one means across visits. The first one is for a specific visit. So say you've got the same user who's come back a number of times. The second one is how you say, or how you personalize against all of those visits and say, even though the person may just be coming back and looking at one page, because they've accumulated all of these points before, we know that that person is theoretically this engaged with our content, so target them with this rule. All right. Otherwise, it would only be for that specific visit. And again, like the other stuff that requires persistence, you have to make sure you have XDB turned on and functioning and capturing data, and that you're able to sync up users across sessions. Sitecore does a decent job of that when you've got, with the anonymous user, it's okay that it will try to do that, but if someone has dumped their cookies, if they're looking on a different browser, if they're on a different machine, all of those things can mean that it doesn't necessarily correlate the contact across visits to your site. So now let's get into content profiling. This is the really cool stuff, and this is how you can say, or how you can target someone based on the type of content that they've looked at the site, or looked at on your site. Profiles are one of the most powerful Sitecore personalization capabilities. These are how you automatically categorize user based on the content that they've looked at, and then target them based on that content. Profiling can be a challenging thing to get your head around at first, but an analogy I like to use is a scorecard, right? So if you think of it as a score, or in that analogy, each individual scorecard itself would be represented by a thing called a profile, right? And that can represent things like a site visitor, or a certain product interest, or something like that, right? The categories in that individual scorecard are then provided by these things called profile keys, right? So if your profile is pet interest, your profile keys might be cat, dog, iguana, fish, rock. And then the mapping of those points to pages is done by these things called profile cards. Those are what we as implementers set up, and what content authors then use to say, hey, this page is about pet dogs, this page is about pet rocks, etc. And then lastly, the actual targeting is done by choosing, or can be done, using these things called pattern cards. And pattern cards are this very sophisticated thing that Sitecore has developed that uses math that is well beyond my American Studies degree understanding of mathematics to determine how closely a visitor matches a specific set of values in a specific profile. We'll talk about those in depth in a second. When a visitor browses around your site and they visit pages that have profile cards assigned, the scores for those individual categories goes up by the number of points that you've assigned on that pattern card that's been assigned to that piece of content. And then as they browse around, their scores continue to grow, assuming that they view more of these pages. All right, hold on, I think I missed a slide in here. Or they're out of order. Like I said, this is the beta version. Okay, so as a visitor has browsed around your site and gathered points for those individual profiles, you're then able to target the visitor based on that pattern card, right? You're also able to make decisions based on individual profile keys. So, for example, you might create a pattern card that says this person is a dog lover. And in that case, that pattern card, you would set that person up, or you would set that pattern card up as having 100 dog points and no points for other pets, right? And then when you set up your personalization rule, you could say if the visitor matches this pattern card, do X. You can also say if this person has more than 10 dog points, do X. So the reason why you may choose one over the other is if you have pet content for multiple types of pets. You would say if this person matches the dog content, show them dog content. If they match the cat content or the cat pattern, show them cat content. If you don't have that cat content, what you can do is say if this person has more than 5 dog points, then show them dog content. Right? Little subtle difference, still useful. All right, yeah, this is all gotten flipped around. This one should have been first. So individual profiles. These are the starting point for using the content profiling system. These represent the individual scorecard that we'll use for profiling content. You can think of these representing conceptual areas like favorite product type or the one I keep coming back to, pet preference. Right? These are managed in the marketing control panel. To create a new one, you go into the profiles node, insert one. Oh, there we go. That's what I messed up. Okay, there's the screenshot. So you create a new one. When you create the new profile, you'll see a number of nodes that get created underneath of that represent different types of settings that you need to set and create for it. There'll also be settings on the profile item itself. And those settings the two most important ones are type and decay rate. The type setting controls the behavior of the scores that get applied by the individual profile cards under that profile when more than one profile card is applied to a piece of content. If it's percentage, then Sitecore will average those two cards. So if you say dog content, and if you apply the dog content pattern card, the dog content profile card and the cat content profile card to an individual page. If you're using percentage, when a visitor visits that page, they're going to get 5 dog points and 5 cat points, assuming that the cards themselves set 10. If it is the other setting, which I forget, which I need to make a note of. Sorry. Then what it will do is it will add those two together. So in that case, if you've got a 10-point dog card and a 10-point cat card, so if it's the page, they get 10 dog points and 10 cat points. The decay rate is another one of those really interesting mathematical things. It's the percentage of a visitor's scores that will be deducted between visits. So, say you have a 10% decay rate, and someone has scored 100 dog points last time they visited your site. The next time they come back, Sitecore will now consider that will now track them as saying they have 90 dog points. And then the next time it would be 81 dog points until they essentially have no dog points left, right? That's a good way to make sure that the profiling data is fresh. If you are just getting started with this thing, I recommend leaving this to 0 until you have a basic understanding of the way all this works. And until you've seen, hey, you know what? We can't really trust this stuff over time. Let's start adding in a decay rate. All right, so the profile keys. These are the things that live underneath an individual profile, and these are the basic building blocks of the whole profiling system. These represent each of the dimensions for a profile, so like cat or dog, or product level, or brand, etc. These are accessed and managed in the marketing control panel. As you can see, new profile keys are created like other Sitecore content by just inserting them. And when setting up content profiling, you'll want to create a profile key for each user preference that you want to base your personalization rules on, right? Once you've done that, you want to set up some profile cards. These profile cards are tools that you use to assign those profile keys and profile key values to content. This is kind of the broker between the setup that you've done and the content author. So you want to be, you want to give these some thought when you're just creating them, as opposed to just create them and leave all the default values. We'll talk about that. I'll show you that in a second. When a site visit, coming back to this, when a site visitor visits a page with a profile card assigned, their profile key score for each one of those profile keys will be incremented based off of what you've set in that profile card. These are all created underneath the profile cards node in the marketing control panel, and there is one value that can be edited on the profile cards node folder. This is authoring selection. This is an important one. I guess that's legible. You're able to choose single or multiple. If you choose single, it means that a content author can only choose one card from that profile when they're assigning profile cards to content. If you choose multiple, then they're able to assign multiples, and that's where those things like the the additive versus average come into play. So the individual profile cards, you want to kind of give these a couple minutes of thought, because these are the things that content authors see, and as we all know, content authors can't always be trusted to choose the right thing. So you want to make it as easy for them as possible, right? And that means filling this out smartly. The name field is pretty obvious. That's the thing that gets used inside the CMS, like a name everywhere. The description field is used to explain what the profile card represents inside the CMS when users are selecting it. You'll see that pop up later. The image field is used by the CMS to help users quickly identify the pattern card. You can think of this as like the icon, and setting this to something intelligent is important for the same reason. Setting item icons is also important so that people can quickly at a glance tell one thing from another. And then the most important one, though, is the profile card field value. And that's where you enter the values that a user's profile scores are going to be incremented by when someone visits that page, right? So if you want their score to go up by 10 points, you choose 10 here. You can set different values for different keys, so you don't have to choose a one-to-one mapping between pattern cards and keys. So for example, if, following our pet analogy, if you want to create a dog card and a cat card and then a mammal card, you can create a dog one, give them 10 points for dogs, create a cat one, give them 10 points for cats, create a mammal card, and give them 5 points for dogs and 5 points for cats. Lastly, I'm going to talk about pattern cards. Pattern cards are the things that you use when you're setting up a personalization rule to actually try to target a user based on the content that they really looked at. Right? These pattern cards can be used when using as personalization rules. Like I said, Sitecore uses a lot of fancy math to figure out which pattern card a visitor best matches at any given time for each profile. That's an important thing, that after a visitor has started collecting profile key scores, they will always match one of these pattern cards for each profile. Even if they've only visited one page and you set the threshold on the pattern card to 100, if they've accumulated 10 points, they will always match the pattern card that is closest to them, right? So if you set up a dog pattern card that has 100 dog points and someone visits a dog page, they may only have 10 dog points, they will match that dog pattern card as long as they don't have more points for another, or that better match a different card. That's really nice because you can always tell, because someone always matches something, unless they matched nothing. But it's not like there's a threshold that they have to meet to start matching those cards. Oh, and then when you're setting those up, that there are a couple of fields. You've got the name. It's like the name. The pattern field is the most important. That's where you set what number or what numerical pattern you want them to match. So, for example, for dogs, you would set that. And for dogs, if you're incrementing by 10 points on your profile cards, you would want to set this to 100 on your pattern card. Likewise, for cats, you would set cats to 100 on the cat profile or the cat pattern card. If you wanted to target people who you just knew were interested in mammals, you could set dogs and cats to 100% and leave lizards at 0. Right? And then if someone is equal to dogs and cats, then they will match that one better than they would just dog or cat. Now, how do you actually assign that profile in those pages? There's this little icon over on the right side of Content Editor that people often don't even realize is an icon or a button, and it's this thing, right? It's actually the profile card button. It should be there on all content items in the content tree. If you click on it, it opens up the interface to add individual profile cards, which we're going to get to. There we go. You click on it, it looks like that. You'll see a list of all the profile cards that exist. Then, if you click on one of them, hit the edit button, you can choose your profile card. And then once it's done, or once you've chosen that, it'll show you which one or which ones are applied. And that's that description we were talking about before. That's the icon we were talking about before. And this is why or one of the reasons that's important. The other reason is after you've applied all that stuff and after you've applied all that stuff and you come back to Content Editor, what you will see is now the button, and you'll also see the icons of any profile cards that you have assigned to that piece of content. Right? Really handy thing. Also a good reason why you want to make your icons obvious, not use tiny text on them like I have here, and also not make them ridiculously obnoxious either, because people will be seeing them. Alright, so how do you actually personalize using those content profile scorecards? You use the rules, and there are 3 to think about. There's one where a specific profile key in the interaction profile compares to a specific value. That's the one I was talking about, how you can say if a person has more than 10 dog points, show them this dog content. If they have more than 10 cat points, show them the cat content. If they have less than 10 dog points and more than 5 cat points, show them cat content or something like that, right? You can combine these in ways like that. The next one, this is the one that you're going to use, well, this isn't the one you're going to use the most, but this one you can use to target a specific visit, and you can say if the current visit matches the specific pattern card in the specific profile, when you choose this one, you choose the profile. You have to choose profile first. Then you choose the specific pattern card. The next one is like that rule that we just talked about. However, this one persists across visits, again, assuming XDP is enabled and all of that. So that's basically how you set up personalization or based on user behavior. There's a lot of things that you kind of have to do for all of that, and a lot of pointing and clicking if you want to start doing that at scale, right? So, for example, a really good use case that I had seen for it before was you have a website that has a bunch of industries underneath of it. That these are the industries that a professional services organization serves. And what you want to do is create a profile for industries that someone's interested in, and then you want to create a profile key for each of those industries, and then you want to create, the profile card and the pattern card that correspond to each of those industries as well. And then you also want to make sure that all the content underneath each one of those is tagged with those profile keys, or those profile cards, right? So that this way, if someone comes to an education page, like the education landing page or one of the education subpages, that you now know that that person is interested in education content, right? To do all of that, it would take a lot of content authoring. Luckily, you can script this stuff. Thanks to the miracle that is Sitecore Powershell extensions, you're able to script all of this stuff. Because everything that you've seen so far, even though there may be different interfaces for it, it's all Sitecore content at its heart, right? So because Sitecore PowerShell extensions can edit Sitecore content, we can use it to automatically do all of this stuff. So I've written this script that I point at a location in the content tree. It looks at that place. It starts underneath of it for each, or it creates a profile for the starting point. It creates a profile key, profile card, and pattern card for each one of the items underneath of it, and then will automatically assign that profile card to all of the content at that node and underneath of it. It just makes life a lot easier when you have hundreds of content items to do that. Really a cool thing. I don't have a demo of it right now because I don't do demos in presentations because that's painful. But if you want an example of the code and how that all works, I'd be happy to talk to you about it and show it off. And lastly, again, to help manage all of this stuff, that there's a lot of pointing and clicking to do, especially when you're going to go create individual personalization rules, because you have to do those on each place, theoretically, that a component exists that you want to personalize. If you're using multiple rules, it can take a lot of time very quickly on you. Luckily, Sitecore, within the last couple of versions, have created this thing that allow you to predefine these rules. The individual rules can now be created inside the marketing control panel, and then you choose the individual rules and rules that apply, and then based on and then when you're setting up your personalization, instead of having to say if this person matches the cat profile card and they've achieved this many engagement points and they're from this geographic location and they're not logged in, you can create one of these predefined rules that has all of that encompassed in it, and then when when a marketer is going to go personalize a component and you want to say, hey, this is the person, this is a cat person, you call this rule cat people, and then all they have to do is choose the one rule and then apply it, and all of the logic that you've predefined will be executed when that rule goes to execute. So this is all done in the marketing control panel underneath personalization. New rules are created by creating a conditional rendering rule under the predefined rules item. It's got a name, and then it's got a field that holds the individual rule. In this case, you can see we're targeting people who purchased who are purchasing an iPhone. You click the rule to edit it. It'll open up the rule editor that you've seen when you're setting up personalization. This should be pretty old hat by this point. You'll also see this this field for choose actions. I think that's just because they're reusing an interface here. That rule or that functionality itself doesn't really get used. And once you're done, you hit OK. Now you can choose that rule when you're setting up content. One of the other really nice things about it is that on those items, those predefined rule items, there's this tab that says usage. And you can see all the pages on the site that are using that rule, which is a really handy thing when you're trying to figure out, like, is anyone actually using this stuff I made? Or I need to make this rule, or I need to make some rule changes because we've changed around the way the pattern cards work or something like that. And you want to see how many places are going to be impacted. This is a really easy way to like get all that information. And as evidenced by my dogs, that's the end of the presentation. So thank you guys for sitting through the second version, or the second run through of this, along with my various things that need to get fixed. I appreciate it. Anyone have any questions? Anything you want to talk about with this? Yeah. Easy ones, easy questions. Let me rephrase that. Anyone have easy questions? Okay.
So the script that you made to, are you scripting profile keys, profile cards and parent cards? Or
Yeah.
you are also just scripting the content view side of it?
No, it's all of it.
All of it.
So essentially what it does is it looks at the, so it creates the pattern cards, it creates all this stuff in the marketing control panel, and then it applies that stuff to the content.
How do you define the values for keys into the cards?
There's a little header block in the script that says like, make the default, each pattern card is 10 points, the max is 100 or something like that. I forget the actual details of it, but it's like that, right? So you create that stuff and then you run the script and it goes through and plugs those in for you. It doesn't do all the nice things like set an icon for each one and set a description. You got to go in and do that yourself. But it's still a vast labor savings because all that stuff gets created for you. Then you just have to go in and dress it up a little bit. But most excitingly, it tags all the content for you.
Yeah.
With the assumption that hey, if this page is underneath this profile, or if it's underneath this page that represents this profile key, then I assume that it should have the pattern card or the profile card for that profile key assigned to it. Yeah?
So, my question might be down. So, thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
First of all, how important it is for the site to have logging functionality to really utilize this feature of Sitecore?
Not at all.
Right.
You don't have to do it. I joke that if you have users who are authenticating to your site, that it's like turning the cheat codes on for personalization, because then there are rules that exist inside the security section where you can say, if this field in a user profile value equals X, then do Y. And you have a pretty good sense that whatever that X is, it's pretty trustworthy, right? All the stuff that I was talking about today are in situations where you have to guess. Right, like if I come to the site and I'm browsing around a lot of cat content, even though I'm obviously a dog person, I may have set up in my it might just be because my mother's looking at getting a cat and I want to look at good things to get her for a as a present or something. Even though most of the time I'm going to be just going to the website to order dog food, right? But if I've created a user profile on the site and I say hey, I order dog food all the time. When you're setting up the personalization rule targeting a dog person, what you probably want to do is say, if the user is authenticated and their profile indicates that they are, and this profile field indicates that they are a dog person, then show them dog stuff. If this person is not authenticated and they match the pattern card for a dog, show them dog stuff, right? And then this way you can handle both of those cases, right? You could still use this stuff for unauthenticated users, or for authenticated users, right? In fact, the first time that I did this, and the time that when I really learned all about the ins and outs of all of this, we were doing it for authenticated users, and what we were doing, we were doing it for a split, where there were authenticated and unauthenticated users. And what we wanted to do was use profile cards or pattern cards to match as the kind of arbiter of those things. And we were trying to figure out how to set a user's profile card programmatically when someone authenticated. We never really figured that out. So what we ended up doing was doing the rule exactly like I was saying. Like, if they match this pattern card, or if their profile field says X, then they're this person. Of course, that was before the predefined rules came along, so that was a pain in the butt. But now it would be a lot easier.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah, I always had a question about personalization because it's kind of always been talked about. And it's great if you're on a site and you're the only one looking at it and yeah, it's cool. But the second it's personalized, and I don't know whether anybody else can answer this, the second it's personalized and you say, man, I just saw this article, click here. And then you're telling somebody, well, that person's calling our customer service, like, why can't I see this?
Yes.
How do people handle that? Like, do you label it and say, this is specifically for you? Or
Be better. That's the answer. Be better.
Right.
You know, just honestly, you've really got to think about that stuff, right? And that's the reason why I'm generally an advocate for not using personalization to drive radical user experience changes, right? That, like, you don't want someone to come to the site who's a dog person and see all of these navigation items, and then when someone comes to the site and they like fish, they see like one navigation item, right? Because that's going to cause, like, that's just going to cause a myriad of problems. What you want to do is try to use this stuff in a more subtle way, such as when they come to the homepage, right? That if there's a banner for a promotion, like a promotional banner, right? And it's like, hey, save 10% on pet food, right? That if they come and you know they're a dog person, you show them a picture of a dog. If they come and they're a fish person, show them a picture of a fish, right? But the same thing is still there, right? They still have access to the same stuff. You might want to go a little bit further, right? So, like, for example, if you know if you're running a promotion on dog food, and you know they're a dog person, show them the promotion for dog food. If they come to the site and they're not a dog person, maybe not show them that promotion, but don't, you know, make it impossible for them to get to that promotion page, right? Just don't emphasize it as much, right? So yeah, you know, that actually is one of the one of the still remaining challenges of this stuff, right? That I feel like people kind of go through the stages of getting into personalization. The first one is, hey, we bought the product, let's do this. And then they're like, oh, wow, that's really hard. And then they get to the like, oh, okay, and they see my presentation, they're like, oh, okay, that's not so hard, we're gonna do all this stuff. And then they get to the like, oh, geez, we can't actually do all this stuff because this means that now instead of having one banner image, we need 10 banner images because we've got 10 profile keys and we want to personalize that banner, right? And then they get into the like, oh, okay, we've got that set up, but now we're making these user interface changes and people are confused, right? It's all kind of the like, everything's great, everything's not. Everything's great, everything's not. And the real answer is practice, forethought, working with a good partner. Working with a good partner.
So on the example you gave, the only time that I've seen, and it would be akin to showing somebody a specific, let's say, article or something like that, that like show on a page, not you took them to the article page, but like, hey, I'm seeing this particular article or something like that on the page. Say, hey, go check this out. They don't see it because their personalization didn't match. From a UI perspective, the only thing I've seen that works, and it's still not the greatest, is to provide share links within stuff, so that you're at least empowering the person to say, oh, I want to share this. And what you share out to whoever you're trying to share it would be probably the landing page of that piece of content that may just be part of the page you're on. And that's the only thing I've seen that actually kind of works on that. And I've seen exactly the thing you're talking about before, where, you know, a personalized page has stuff on it and it doesn't match the URL because the URL is the same for everybody.
Yeah.
So you do run into that where, not everybody sees what they think that they're going to see.
One of my favorite scenarios for for using personalization in a way that I think helps avoid those pitfalls was I was doing a demo for a tool company, and it was, say there's this tool, a Sawzall, right? You know, the big giant thing with the handle and the blade that like you can use to cut through rebar, you can use to cut through tree limbs, you can use to cut through 2x4s, right? And the tool has a number of use cases where when someone would come to that tool page, what you might want to do is show them like, hey, here's like if you know that it's someone who does construction, you show them here they are cutting through rebar, right? If you know that it's someone who's like a home wood shop guy, here they are cutting through like a 1x4, right? If you know that they're like a DIY home or like landscaper, here they are cutting through a tree limb on it, right? But the content's all still generally the same. It's just the like promo image is different, and that maybe you rewrite the text and say like, this is great at cutting through tree limbs, or you know, cutting through tree limbs and 2x4s and rebar, right? And then if you know, in one of the other cases, you could say this is great for cutting through rebar and also 2x4s and tree limbs. You know, like if you're going to do that type of thing, you're going to change the content and keep it subtle, so you're still saying the same thing. You might just be emphasizing other stuff over it. Other questions?
Well, let me ask the last maybe. So thank you for the presentation. And okay, from if you have only Sitecore as an analytics collector, that's fine. But we also have like Omnichannel, Google Analytics, so on and so forth.
Yep.
Can I connect it all together?
Sure.
And personalize and and how it works? I
So
know that.
Can you? Yes, absolutely. Is it out of the box and you can do it? No, because Sitecore basically just built the thing to work with their own products, right? Luckily, through XConnect and all that stuff, you can easily build those, or you can more easily build those integrations. And I wouldn't be surprised if over time everyone ends up having one that's like, you know, like every agency has their like, their Google Analytics connector that like, you know, can read in Google Analytics data and put it right there in the CMS. I would recommend against that, however, because this is actually one of the big use cases for Sitecore Analytics. Sitecore over the years has tried to pretend that analytics can do all sorts of interesting, great stuff to various degrees of success. In reality, the thing that it is most powerful for is powering this stuff. So for the price, basically, of maintaining that data, right, which can be sometimes steep depending upon what people's budgets are used to, right? But having the database servers for it, having the processing server for it, and collecting that data there, and doing the minimal amount of setup work, you can use that data in a much more, I would say, less as a like reporting tool, but more from a like functional perspective, right? Like you can use it for this. It may not be great for giving you like the detailed reports you might want about like real-time visitors and stuff like that people might like out of the other tools, but at the end of the day, it's also kind of nice because it means that you're not mucking up your reporting stuff and the stuff that like business analysts look at with all of this like, hey, what are these profile cards, right? I don't really care about that. It's just a purely functional thing that you've created, tailor-made for your content authors to very easily understand and utilize.
As I hope I understand everything correctly, so it means omnichannel, for instance, omnichannel is actually useless in Sitecore.
No. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say useless. I would say that it's still really useful for capturing analytics data, right? And that if you want to use that data that's captured in it to drive personalization decisions, you can do that, right? Yeah. You have to set up, you'll have to create some sort of method for mapping that data into the Sitecore data, into the Sitecore analytics data.
I see. So I need like a function which will correctly map something to points.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and Sitecore has created a lot of infrastructure behind being able to do that.
Yeah, I see.
We've done it on other projects before. The way I always pitch it to the client, when we talk about the different personalization, is that visitor information meaning like about the current visitor, not about like, and Ed was talking about this, like authenticated versus unauthenticated. Authenticated, a lot of times you'll get about the visitor, specific information you have because of who that user is, not necessarily what they've done. I always consider that, and explain that that's explicit information about the user. That's you know because they authenticated, there's data about that, versus implicit, meaning that it's implied by what they've done on the site. A lot of times that I've seen useful information, and we've pulled this in from external sources, both of which would be like information from Salesforce, let's say, or something like that, or information from additional tracking that you know about that. A lot of times that gets put, and we've done it, extended the information that you see about the visitor, so that you could do the combination that Ed was talking about, where you could do both. I am basing it on what they've done on the site versus what I already specifically know about them, based on the fact that they authenticated, like what state they're from or something like that is usually those kind of things that you get. But done it a little bit too, where information that is from outside analytics about the user is exposed actually on the visitor end. You could do it the other way too, but it does kind of get muddied in there because assuming you're using Sitecore's analytics, they kind of step on each other. I have seen a setup where as much as possible, that kind of stuff was steered from external data that said XDB. It was really weird, and that's not one that I did. The stuff I'm talking about now I did. I saw the thing where they hooked in and were driving the analytics through XConnect to populate XDB. So they were still using Sitecore's analytics, but the data that was coming in from an external system, and I think it was Omniture. Which is really hokey to me, but it worked for whatever reason they were doing it. But there's definitely ways that you can extend it. The nice thing about Sitecore rules, which is what a lot of this stuff is based on, is extending and adding to the rules. It's pretty straightforward. The interface supports it, but it is extra work. They don't really. There's no for free. And I think I'm saying is that you probably get people that have proprietary setups for it, like. Here's our Omniture connector where we're going to do these couple things so they're exposed or so, but I don't know of any marketplace thing that I've seen that just is available to do it, so it's almost all custom development. But it is doable. I mean, it's work.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think that often comes up and is one of the bigger, and it's actually the reason why I've started doing these series of presentations of the building blocks of personalization, is because there are a lot of Sitecore customers out there who are basically still in CMS only mode. Right, and that those folks are often the ones who get picked off by Episerver or Sitefinity, right, or lesser or Drupal, or that those are the folks who often get who we end up losing from the Sitecore world, and that's no good for all of us in this room, right? Or those are the people who end up. Adobe comes in and does this great demo where they show off all this functionality that is essentially the same functionality that we all just looked at, right? And they're like, look at this, I bet you're not doing this in Sitecore, right? And they're like, oh yeah, no, we're not. Let's go spend $3 million on your stuff. And then their poor Sitecore partner now has to integrate this Adobe crap. It's it's great to get people aware that this stuff works and to have those conversations to be like, yeah, let's start doing this because you've already bought this tool. But the flip side of that is that they often don't have real budgets to do that, right? That doing that thing where, pulling your Google Analytics data and using personalization rules that use that, right? That's not going to be a cheap project, right? Same thing with Omniture or any of that, right? And so if someone wants to start dipping their toes in the water here, it's a lot easier to be like, oh yeah, all that XDB data that you've been capturing and paying to back up and paying to keep up all of that. Now let's actually start using that as opposed to let's start doing a much more complex integration until you get to the end of what you can do with this out of the box.
Yeah, and I have a question. I like the last comment is because based on my experience, based on my observation, our customers buy Sitecore due to personalization feature. It's the main reason why they buy the license. But in fact, based on my experience, they do not use this functionality.
Yeah.
And this is reality. And the question is to you, maybe you, okay, and this is a good sample when we provide some, based on personalization, some good experience to show different image. But do you have some like examples when personalization brings a real value or measurable value to the customer?
Yes, but you never really get a chance to talk about them or share them because it's, you know, beyond just, oh, Joe Schmo company, they started doing personalization and their revenues through the website went up 20%. Right? That's kind of the extent to which you can really talk about that, right? You can't really like share people's individual KPIs because they tend to get bent out of shape, especially if they're like, you know, one of their competitors happens to be in the audience. But all of those reasons are exactly the reasons why I do these presentations. Not just this one, but the other one that's the, like, you know, literally the AB, like personalization for dummies, basically, right? And that one, I've done it at Symposium now three times, and like before they even opened the call for papers, they were like, can you come and do it again? And do something else, which is what this is today. And it's because every time the room is packed, right? It's full of Sitecore, like, you know, Sitecore customers who are like, we want to start doing this stuff. We don't have any real money to throw at it today. But, you know, this is why we bought it, and no one ever really talked to us about it, right? So, yeah, it's a real big need out in the world.
Sure.
So you actually both of you all mentioned that there's a way, and I'm assuming you mean like there's a library or something that you can override or manipulate a user or an IP address that we're tracking that visitors' personalization data, and you can use it for many reasons, setting up test cases. Or even like what this gentleman was talking about, if you have like a different presentation that you want to give to one person, you can generate a link that is passing along that personalized data embedded in the link.
Embedded in the link, yep.
That's the first half. The second half is populating that data. And I was doing some testing and I was having a hard time. Well, I didn't do that much. But I didn't see anything clear right off the bat of like overriding or populating a visitor's session or or overriding completely without having to go into the actual guts of the database and manipulating. As a matter of fact, I didn't see anything that really jumped out to like completely reset a authenticated user other than possibly dropping that user and then recreating that user.
Yeah, there's a...
I know there's a lot of
yeah, okay, so let me work backwards. As far as like clearing out a user's data, like, you know, wiping them clean, there is totally a way to do that. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. I know that if I had to go do it, I would go look it up. There's like a button for it in the Habitat site. Right, in the, I think it's the demo feature, that if you go and like, on the Habitat site, as you browse around, there's a little sidebar that swoops in that will show you all the stuff. But I think there's a button there that says like, you know, get rid of all this. And I would go look at what that button does and then totally not copy and paste it into whatever I was working on. Because you totally should never, no one would ever do that.
Never
right?
did that.
Never.
Download it and get now.
Right, you wouldn't actually do that. You would just go do the poll and yeah. Anyway, or the clone. But yeah, so there is a way to do that. As far as kind of from a tactical way of someone sent a link, the way I would probably approach that would be, you've got some sort of like token in the query string of the page or something, and I could swear there used to be a rule in Sitecore that was like a query string parameter x equals y, and it disappeared at some point. I might have just had too much bourbon between then and now, but I could swear that it actually existed. If not, I would whip that type of thing up. Right, that would be a really easy, like my first conditional render, or my first Sitecore condition to do. And then what I would say is you could even take that and then register a goal for it, or do something based on that, right? Like write the pipeline processor that says like, if these field values do this, then take the current user's profile field, right? Because you can create a virtual user for the person, start assigning user profile fields to them, and say like, okay, this person's inherited interest is cats. This person's inherited interest is, dogs or whatever. And then when you're setting up a personalization rule, say, if this person matches the cat pattern, or their inherited interest equals cat, then consider them a cat person.
Yeah, so Sitecore did have, that's right, there was you could do rules based on parsing a query string at one point in time. I know that was in there.
Right, okay, I'm glad I'm not losing my mind.
No, that's in there. It's been several years since I played with it, so I can't guarantee that someone should be able to do that. On the virtual user, we used it before where we have swapped out. We've swapped out on the virtual user profile information, but that was done through code. I don't know, what Ed's talking about might be able to be done. It was not that difficult in code for us to do it. As far as now, it's been so many years, I'm trying to think of what the condition was, but there was something that we were doing within session where we updated the user's profile information. There's a couple attributes about them, and we were using those attributes for personalization. So we were actually changed, because I remember going through with the client about what was persistent at the beginning of session versus not. And there were several things like, no, when they authenticate, until they're done with their visit, never change these pieces of information, but these could be changed. And so we were updating information on the user's profile, and they're virtual users. We were updating the information on the virtual user that we had extended. We were doing it through code, but it was not very difficult. So you're talking about 3 years ago, so I don't remember the extent, but it was doable without a whole lot for us to do that. And we were personalizing based on that information. So during the visit, it was possible for them to see. And this was outside of using Sitecore's regular personalization for what they had done. It was us actually setting a value about the person, not profile cards and stuff like that. We're actually updating their profile because some of the personalization was about the profile. So it's a little bit different of a scenario. It's done, like I said, it was done with code, but it was not very difficult for us to do.
And
it was all in virtual user.
4 years ago, Martin Miles outlined how to write this query string thing. I honestly don't know why it's not just right in the product, but
I thought it was right in the product.
It was. I swear to God, it was.
I'm pretty sure
I
it was right in the
swear
product.
it was.
Yeah,
but
I think it was. If it's not buried in there somewhere.
It's probably part of that campaign ID, like you can pass in the SC campaign ID.
Yeah.
And then you can get it.
But definitely not.
Maybe that's what it was.
Either that or we used his stuff. Well, no, that's 2015. Yeah, maybe we used this and extended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that he actually does. He does the smart thing about sharing the source code, where he's like, I'm not going to actually put all this in here. Deal with it. Like, figure it out.
Yeah.
You're a programmer. But then, there's where the query string parameter and all of that.
Yeah, the demo I saw for the Habitat version, what they do is you go to a fake Google page and you click on it and it passes in campaign ID, like the text for marketing control panel campaign ID. And then based on that, you can personalize the content.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you have to.
Oh, goodness, what is this?
Uh-oh.
They're not the same.
Now it's not.
You know what this is? This This is a strike, boys. But
Which habitat site?
I don't know.
This is not,
It's
yeah, this is the old one.
It's Andy's, yeah. But so here's all your stuff, right?
But it's such a useful marketing tool that we have on other demos that we've built, but we're actually not habitat based or anything. Have used that particular thing for personalization and rules just so that you can see what was going on.
Yep.
Usually, because we were extending what Sitecore did, we were talking to like Marquetta or something like that to see what had happened. So it was, here's Sitecore stuff plus here's an integration we're working on, and you can see how that changed